Hello everybody. So I'm just going to get our contestants for today invited and we're going to kick a game off. So I would have sent Flavio a friend request, but I've actually hit the friend limit. Where's Flavio? Sorry about breathing noises. A man gotta breathe, you know? We're just waiting on Flavio, and if not, I'm going to organise for a replacement now. Hmm. Sorry to hold you guys up. We'll try and get this game sorted as quickly as we can. And I do want to give a quick thank you to Rokultira, who donated $10 last night. And I'm sorry I didn't actually have the widgets sorted out again. I must have had to remake the scene at some stage and forgotten to add them back in. So thank you. I'm just a bit out of practice because it's been like 2 months since I've hosted a show match. So anyway, I've got Crimson here with me. And we're just seeing if we can find an opponent for him. Or if Flavio can turn up, but he's offline in Discord at the moment, so I'm not hopeful. But if anyone would like to come sub, just message me in game. I'm not actually in the chat at the moment. I'm going to come check it though. Yeah, sorry about this bit of a clusterfuck, but we're getting there. Oop. Thought I had something left in that. I didn't. Epic fail. I didn't take the thing off the top to remind myself I'd finished it. God, I'm dopey. Anyway, still just chilling here with Good Power Crimson Cantab, so just checking out me home city. Got some nice exclusives. In fact, I've actually got, you can't see this at the moment, but I've got the Temple of Apophis, me gingerbread houses, and me igloos, all in me Celt city. It looks pretty ballin', you know. Yeah, I'm just trying to keep you guys entertained. Just waiting on word back about a potential sub from a couple of players, so just give me a sec. Well, I don't think Flavio is here, so I'm just going to keep trying to find a sub. G'day, what's going on? What's happening in Servermania? So big shout out to our Espanol translator here in the community that makes sure that all the new content that gets brought out is translated into Spanish. So there's a good list of people actually who do the translating on Brenos and Commentorios. PF2K's got a really nice graphic of basically the whole production team for the expansion to the game, so it's really nice getting to see it all charted out nicely like that too. I can't recall everyone on the list, but I know Matrix Soft is on there and Xenor. So yeah, shout outs to those guys too, and to everyone else on the list. So thank you for bringing us Brenos and Commentorios. And yeah, sorry about the delay, guys. I'm just trying to find us a suitable opponent here for Crimson, so it shouldn't be too much longer. Because I'm pretty keen to bring you guys a series on Ghost Lake and Treasured Island. I'm not so keen on Sheltered Pass myself, but it's a fairly nice map. And good for players that like to wall up, so gotta give them a bit of love sometimes. As much as I'm against it. Sorry guys, we shouldn't be too much longer. But I'm not quite sure where Flavio's at. Something might have come up, so. Well, this is awkward. I might have to play Crimson myself, it seems. Yeah, apologies about the big delay here. Still looking. Okay, I think I've got someone. Oh, actually. Okay, we've got this sorted. Okay, here we go. Let's just change this. Alright, so we're finally ready to roll. I'm sorry about the big delay. Got Ghost Lake starting out. And we're just about to get going right now. Okay. I'll turn that disgusting speed down. So, spawning as player 1 today, as our substitute player for the day, because unfortunately I am Flavio was not able to make it, we have the Hoover. So he's taking his first hunt and looks to be going to get his barracks, and his opponent, Crimson Cantab, I'd say is doing something very similar. So, Crimson getting a lot of wood, the Hoover. Oh, actually throwing down a second storehouse. So this is going to hold up his barracks slightly if Crimson continues to distance gather this wood and throw down a barracks. So we might see the Norse player, which is Crimson, the fella in the red trunks today. And be interesting because the Norse spears are the tankiest spears, I believe, but also have the worst damage. Well, I think Sparabara do 9, but the spears that do 10 are Norse, and I'm not sure. Yeah, I think Greek do 11. But anyway, they make up for it with increased health pool. So, for Hoover, already on his 2 storehouses. Crimson, getting his barracks now, making good use of the Norse scout. So, the only civ that can do this is the Norse, and they've actually got 2 scouts, because they've also got a ranged scout. Both their scouts are actually slower though. than the 9-speed mounted scouts the other civs get. So there's sort of a bit of a trade-off. The mounted scouts, 10-speed scouts, sorry. And yeah, the trade-off is there's a much bigger health pool on the scout, 600 instead of 400 health. And I think they deal a little bit more. They deal the same damage. A little bit more damage, 1 damage more. Yeah, so they get 1 damage more on the beefier scout. So basically they're better at clearing stuff alone. These guys and these guys do melee damage, and the ranged and the Egyptian scout, they do range damage. So that means that PF2K said this before, that against Persian the ranged scout is basically useless, but against regular old spearmen, ranged scout is far better than melee scouts, regardless of what civ. So starting out, we've got Crimson with his initial spearman heading across the field. Behover just now getting his spearman. They've got 12-second to 12-second research time. Pretty much even on that. Crimson actually housed for this point in time. But now here we go. Units queued straight back up. So he's only housed for a couple of seconds there, so it's no huge deal. But yeah, ideally you do want to have a house just as you're about to be housed for sort of optimal gameplay. So Hoover, in the meanwhile, he's up to 4 spears already. Crimson got 4 on this side of the map. Actually got 6 out in total. So yeah, he is 1 spear ahead, but he's still got 2 heading across the map. So he's actually down. Really, that's sort of the defender's advantage you get early game. Oops, sorry. So Crimson hightailing it out of here for now. He's going to have a slightly slower H2, but he's going to get out an extra villager to compensate. Though, oh, he's going to lose a spearman here, and potentially another. And so that is going to... Oh, he does save this other spearman. So it would be a big waste to be throwing them away. But he actually looks to be sending these 3 across here and bringing these ones. Well, it looks to be bringing them all across, really. Must have rallied them to about here. I think he realizes he's actually committed a little bit more to the spearman, because Behover had cut spearman and Crimson had still trained another. So even though he'd lost 1, he was still going to be 2 up overall. No, 1 up, sorry. This all really comes down to macro, and because they're not fighting over resources right now, it's not going to make or break the game, but if they were, it really could. Behover, already being in age 2, is able to use his Hypaspis to really clean up this fight quite quickly. They've got about the same damage as the 11 damage spearmen, yeah, so 11 damage each, but these guys have a nice handy multiplier. They have 2.5 times damage against all infantry, whereas the spearmen, their 2.5 times damage multiplier is against cavalry. So Behover getting his H2 town center. Crimson still just gathering the wood for it and a little bit over-gathered on the stone. Actually, Behover is by a fairly similar amount. Sometimes this isn't such a bad idea if you're worried about the town center getting picked off, because then you don't have to gather more stone to actually throw up it, because you won't get a complete refund once you've started building it. You'll get an amount proportional to the amount of health left to build with. And so, it looks as though Behover is going to try and cut across the map as quick as he can. He's got 2 Hypaspis out, whereas Crimson has only got the 1 throwing axeman, who work much the same way. Only a 2 times damage multiplier. No, actually, sorry. They got a 3 times damage multiplier against infantry, but only about half the damage of the Hypaspis. They also have a nice multiplier against range of double, but yeah, their base damage is among the lowest in the game. So without being able to get onto the throwing axeman straight away, this isn't such a good fight for Behover. and Crimson just really needs to focus down the pacifists, which he's doing a good job of, which he's gotten now. But in saying that, Vahuva just has that much there, he's able to force him back for now, and Crimson forced to have the micro back to up here, because if Vahuva had have seen this, this could have been very drastic for Crimson. He does have 7 workers there building it though, which is a bit of a commitment, but at the same time, it's a good insurance policy against these 7 units. So it's just about finished now, it's pretty much safe. And the units are going to pop up in range, so take a couple of shots from the tower, or from the town centre, as well as a couple from the infantry, so just a bit of damage to soften them up. And in this matchup it does matter because neither side has access to healing until age 3. It's not as though it's Persian versus Egypt or Babylonian, for instance, where both civs can get access to stable healing sources within age 2. Egypt has their priestesses of Ra, Persian has their A-tents, which they can actually make use of in age 1, and Babylonian have pharmacology and age 2 unique tech to them to heal all military units. So Crimson actually a little bit behind in the score of the population at the moment, actually down by 9 villages because he's actually committed to a second barracks there, and yeah, was a little bit slower on the town centre than his opponent. So Vahuva actually like clockwork at the moment, getting the armory, already getting chisel as well. So he wants to pump out those upgrades. He's got a nice 1-on-1 opening, which is fairly conventional for the Greeks. He's got 1 barracks, 1 range, 1 stables. Although the Sarasophroi, they're not going to be hugely useful against Norse, other than being a deterrent to getting skirmishes, and then later on longbowmen. Well, not longbowmen, sorry, bowmen. The Norse is probably going to want to play around Raider as the Toxotes come out anyway, so they're investing in more and more stables and more barracks over adding ranges in age 2 is probably the way to go for Norse, as we can see. Crimson getting his stables, having gotten 2 barracks, because the throwing axemen, they fear the least badly against the ranged counter infantry unit like the Toxotes in this matchup. And right now, Crimson going to get a very good catch of all these workers. There's 8 workers right here, but there's a whole lot of throwing axemen, so there's no way the workers are really going to be able to continue gathering from here. And a couple of them are going to fall, actually. Picking off 2 of them dangerously low. The storehouse is going to go down. Crimson probably could have sat a throwing axeman or 2 there just to snipe the 2 of those. It's going to be a bit too slow to get that, but at the same time, this has sort of kept Vahuva back out because he knows Crimson hasn't brought absolutely everything here. It's only a small raiding force, really. And he doesn't necessarily want to engage on this because it's big enough that a delay can mean these guys can come across and hit it. But at the same time, Crimson is using them to build. So if Vahuva can sort of get caught here-ish, it's probably going to be safe for him because he's going to be able to train units, bring his main army up, and really force a favourable fight. So interesting decision making from the 2 players here with their army positioning. And Crimson now actually sort of going to attempt to bait the army into an attack where he can get some throwing axemen straight on the Toxotes, which is actually not too bad of a trade because he can focus them down as well. And the Saris, a bit of an investment here from Vahuva really. They're quite tanky though, and they are going to require Crimson to sprinkle in some spearmen, which are going to be a really bad choice against the Toxotes, because the throwing axemen, yeah, it can at least still return fire, while the spearmen, for instance, aren't really going to fare that well. But now the Sari army, which is a bit of an investment for Vahuva, but he was sort of pretty safe at home after age 1, I think, so he opted to add them in. I think he's got them, even though they're 100 resource units, so a big 700 resource investment. They've got the mobility to be able to push Crimson away from a favourable gold position, further away from a town centre, and force him to come chase him down with a throwing axeman based composition, which as we know, don't really do a lot of damage to the Saris. And Vahoover, in the meanwhile, at the backside of Crimson's base, force him to have to come and deal with this because longhouses are being picked off, so this is going to cause him to not be able to produce as much as he'd like. In fact, he's not going to be able to add more units to this queue until he rectifies that. So, some nice work from Vahoover, and Crimson is actually responding pretty well. But he needs to back this army out, otherwise he's going to lose all these guys and it's going to be really, really hard to respond here. He hasn't got a lot of stuff in production at the moment, and he's going to need to keep adding more and more longhouses, especially with them getting picked off. Already a little bit behind on the working count, which is 60 to 50, so he's down by only 10. He hadn't really fallen any further behind than earlier. So he's been producing the workers well enough, but now he's going to start maybe losing a couple more here. He's lost one, and these storehouses for his wood gathering is going to be destroyed, so he's going to have to move everything across to here for the time being. The raiders are chasing Vahoover's army around, because if they get onto the Toxotes, it can be very, very hard for Vahoover to come back out of this, because they'll be basically 2-shot by the raiders, I think, or 3-shot. And the Saris, as much as they're a nice mobile unit, if they get caught by the spearmen, they're dead. And without any Toxotes to basically zone the spearmen, the rest of the army is just going to melt to Crimson's army at this point. So Vahoover's been playing this really quite smart, but at the same time, he may have overextended here because Crimson has made a really nice choice in that many raiders that the Toxotes, as we can see, dropping like flies, and now the Sarasophroi have to back off, and if Vahoover loses this army, it's a much more expensive trade for him. The raiders only a 75 cost cavalry unit, Saris are 100. Toxotes are a 65 cost unit, and throwing axemen are a 60, so it's quite a favourable fight for Norse if both civs lose the same amount of units. And although Crimson was a little bit slowed down by losing those longhouses, and he really needs to get on top of getting these ones rebuilt, because otherwise he's not going to be able to produce to his full potential. And he needs to rely on not too many raiders being tied up here, because they don't counter the Sarasophroi, who are, out of all the mounted ranged units, the only one that's actually considered cavalry. The rest are actually considered ranged, to my knowledge. So these raiders, they're very, very effective against the Toxotes, and they trade pretty well against the Hypaspis, but they take forever to actually kill Sarasophroi, and it's a fairly even trade. And then obviously against the spearmen, they're actually quite weak. But considering he's got a nice bigger number here, and did get the jump on his opponent there, he basically traded 1-to-1, which is a good fight for the Norse player. Although he's got a lot of really low raiders in this mix, so he needs to get age 3, he needs to get healing to make full value of this, or be able to sneak them around the map and get some value elsewhere with them while they're still alive. Like, even if a handful of them die trying to kill the villagers, at least he's got the villagers perhaps. But he needs to be careful to not send them in alone, otherwise he's just going to get picked off because he hasn't got the health on them to be able to just run by at this point. A lot of them are quite low, and he now chasing a new angle. Gonna get a good catch here. If he sees, oh, he doesn't actually see that. So he's gone a little bit too far. He's too busy trying to defend back in his own base. In fact, this isn't too bad. Only a couple of them have engaged, but that could have been a really, really nice pick for him. In fact, that could have really crippled Vahoover at the moment, who hasn't got a lot of gold in the bank, and probably would like to continue producing more Toxotes. Although these are going to hurt Crimson, he needs to get back on top of those longhouses. He must have had a villager rallied to them, get cancelled for some reason because of another building, or because they were rallied elsewhere, who knows. So, more villagers falling for Crimson. Right now it's 74 to 66 working count. He's actually had caught up to Vahoover somewhat, because Vahoover had sort of stabilised his count and then stopped from there. And right now Crimson, but actually getting wiped out in Vahoover's base there. Although a handful of the raiders have managed to come back down, but only about 3 or 4 of them. The rest of them must have gotten picked off in Vahoover's base, so Crimson just about maxed out the way he wants to be in Age 2 right now before moving to Age 3. But Crimson really taking a beating. All of these villagers here getting denied, and Crimson falling further behind in population. Won't be long before he's 100 behind. And GG. So I think Crimson sort of anticipated to get a bit more value out of the Spearman push, and to not get pushed into so hard by Hoover, who was playing quite greedy trying to take this, but he really only lost 2 villages out of it, pulled the rest back in time. Crimson didn't really seek to track them down with spreading out his throwing axemen so much, and then there were a couple of really favourable fights for Hoover, and Crimson missing this, unfortunately, which I think could have really equalised the game. But GG, guys. Quick look at current population. So Crimson falling a little bit behind early, but it really being amplified after a couple of fights that didn't really go his way. And some that did, but I'm just going to take us through to game 2, guys. I'll be 1 sec. Alright, so really solid gameplay there from Hoover and Crimson, with only a few minor mistakes, but I think he just stumbled a bit there at the start and at the end there with the rating. But saying that, he held off a couple of really good fights there, and that was a good compositional choice from him. And thank you, Wout, for updating the titling of the stream, and it won't be too long. I wonder if I can try and talk these guys into a best of 5 series. And if there's anyone else that wants to play a show match after this, but yeah, hit me up if you want to play after. I'll just have to try and organise an opponent. Oh, I'm looking for Sheltered Pass. Here we go. Alright, so we're getting started on game number 2. gonna play. Shit, my game's crashed. One sec. Well, that's a bit unfortunate. Alright, just waiting on Vahuva to civ swap. Sorry about the delay. Shouldn't be too much longer. Here we go. Alright, so we're about to get this underway. So we're bringing you a sheltered fast game. Should be good fun. Oh shit, no shit. Sorry, one sec. I don't know why it's taking so long. Shouldn't take this long. Why is it taking this long? Okay, here we go. Sorry about that, a little bit early. Jumped the gun, as they say. And sorry about the swearing, I always forget. Okay, so spawning in the 11 o'clock position, the top left of the map, as the Persian player, in the blue trunks, we've got Vahuva today, on his second favourite civ. And spawning in the 5 o'clock position, we have Crimson Cantab in his red Celts. Oh, and he's actually cancelled a Distance Gatherer. Obviously, he would have thrown down the storehouse with a worker or two, had this one gather, but then she's sort of finished her job before this has gone up, so she's started to run back here, but he's caught her about here, so good job to Crimson. Already taking his barracks, so he wants to be able to deal early damage to his Persian opponent. So Vahuva opting for double storehouse, playing this a little bit greedier so far. Wants to be able to maximize his value, out of his wood gatherers. Crimson, in the meanwhile, going all the way up to 7 villages on his hunt. No, we're only 6, and he's going to have a chopper and a second to work towards getting his second storehouse and kickstarting the economy of his Celts. Don't know where I was going with that. Just a little bit tired. Anyway, we've got the barracks for Vahuva now going up, so it's going to be about 2 spearmen behind And the Spearmen do train a second quicker than the Sparrowbar, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, so you and I are going to have a bit of a investigation game here. So it's actually 2 seconds difference. No, 1 second difference, yeah. So 1 second, as I thought. 11 versus 12. So the Spearmen already 3 up over the Sparrowbar, with 1 only popping up now, as the Spearman is going to be about half complete. So about 2.5. Oh, 3. Not quite 3. Yeah. And this has been an aid tent tech already researched by Vahoover. So what that's going to mean, it's actually here, but I've sort of missed it being gathered, being researched. And it gives 10 health per second to a single unit, basically in this sort of field. So it's going to be really good against the Celt Spearmen. They deal 20 damage, 12 damage, 20 damage, 12 damage per hit, but even still, basically only ends up as 2 damage against anything here. Sparrowbar, one of them you can see, is being healed through this, so it's going to make him just a little bit more robust. Crimson actually opting for an attack on villagers now, forcing Vahoover to pull them back. So there hasn't been a Spearman actually fall just yet, but they need to be maneuvered in such a way that these ones that are low aren't at the back of the army, because they're just going to end up getting picked off now. But Vahoover is being denied. A single villager is dangerously low and does fall, so Crimson getting some value out of this. Vahoover actually having a bit of a lull in his food gathering there, being forced to take Picker's Gloves as well. So Crimson already in a really nice spot, because Vahoover, he committed an extra 100 resources to that defense ultimately, and still ended up worse for wear. Losing a villager, being forced back to the berries, and off this hunt for that long, which there isn't much value left in. He needs to really get on the second hunt as quick as he can in this position, or basically really commit to this berries tech too. So right now Crimson, he seems to have everything going his way. If he can get a good snipe here on anything, he can really put Vahoover behind right now. Meanwhile, Vahoover actually trying to take this distant hunt here, but Crimson realizing that Vahoover realizing that Crimson is probably going to go for this. This is going to be a really good scout here for Crimson actually. He's even going to save the Spearman, and he's going to know all about this really aggressive storehouse. So there's a double berries opening here for Vahoover, but in saying that, it's going to need a forward A10 here for Vahoover. So if he can keep rallying all the fights here, he can continue to heal around this position. And this hunt is still being scouted out by Crimson. Those workers just finished now at that hunt. So Vahoover actually taking his age 2, but he is a bit behind in score. After all, he's down a villager at this point. And yeah, he's been forced onto the berries, a little bit slower than the huntables. So Crimson just now going onto berries, hasn't actually scouted another huntable patch at this stage. And has Crimson taken... So Crimson hasn't taken Picker's Gloves, so that's gonna allow Vahoover to actually come out ahead off this berries economy. Crimson having to commit an extra 2 villagers basically, and he's only got 1. I mean, oh no, there we go. Vahoover's actually rallied some off it now. So it's going to get interesting to see that difference. There's just now Picker's Gloves and Hunting Dogs going up for the Celt players, so that's not unusual for Celt, given just how food-centric their economy is. And no matter whether you want to play around Spearmen or Longswords, as really your only H2 food units available, you're going to want a lot of it, and to gather it quite efficiently, because you do have the more disposable unit composition, so to speak. And the Persians have a really, really nice archer unit in their bowmen. Right now, Vahoover just double checking what's coming out of Crimson's base. So there's double Spearman opening. He's still in age 1 at this point, which I think is perhaps a little bit long, but he feels as though he can continue to do damage, and he can. Sparrowbar can't really fight against a slightly bigger number of Spearmen, because they are also slightly cheaper, trained slightly quicker, So Crimson is really forcing Vahuva's hand to an extent, but he probably needed to take the Bronze Age upgrade a little bit quicker. Although he's got all the materials he needs to be able to age up, already on 2 production facilities, so he can continue to pump out lots and lots of spearmen. And as long as he gets some long swordsmen in the mix and gets a range here, he can really push into Vahuva quite hard and capitalize on being ahead by this little amount already. But as we can see, Vahuva already getting 2 villager advantage now over Crimson with the second town centre, so that's 26 to 24 in terms of the worker count at this point. Population does certainly favour Crimson though, so he's definitely got a much bigger army population by about 11 at this point. And he's caught one of the rangers here, so he's going to be able to... Oh, he actually focuses the village. Oh yeah, so he does force the villagers away. And he does have enough spearmen here to destroy this storehouse and back out. Going to get the storehouse and the range. So all he needs to do is back out of this as quickly as he can. Perhaps he could have even left those spears in a dive. Oh no, there's 2 there. Okay. But there was just 1 at first, so... Another range is going to be attempted by Vahuva. And Crimson needs to get a range, or maybe even 2 out, in order to respond to the bowmen coming out now. So they are going to be quite slow. 6-speed units, so are the Sparabara, the Celt infantry, all start out at least 7 speed, including their spearmen, including their long swordsmen, and you can take speed upgrades on top of that. So you can get 7.3 speed in Age 2 and 7.7 in Age 3. So this isn't the best fight, but the long swordsman, if microed onto the Sparabara, and the spearmen are microed directly onto the bowmen, you can actually have a fairly good fight because you've got a bigger unit count off a cheaper force. So you've only got to kill a handful of units to really come out ahead in the trade. Because these bowmen, 50 resources, and the Spara 50 resources, whereas the long swordsmen, they're 60, so you don't really want to lose those, but the spearmen are only 40, so you can take advantage of that. And perhaps Crimson should have opted to only go up to 2 barracks rather than 3 before the archery range, because then it could mean he could already have a range producing by now and have this second range. And that would probably be ideal for the composition that Vahuva's fielded, because Crimson has perhaps lost a bit too many spearmen at this point and is now starting to fall behind in terms of score. Is now 6 workers behind from the delayed town centre. But both players doing a good job on trying to secure vision around the map. And Crimson really did get some great rating value out of the Celts earlier. I just think that, yeah, if he had have perhaps fitted in the archery range when he went for that 3rd barracks, added another range, and then looked at adding another barracks, I think that's probably where he'd really find sort of the sweet spot. Or at least, you know, add that earlier range after 2 racks, and then, you know, sort of go at whatever you really need more of later. I think that's probably the ideal way to open Celt in that situation, where you do get a good amount of damage that lets you go for a 2 racks position. Because you can continue to deal good damage off the 2 racks, then try pull out of a bad fight once the bowmen start to come out, because against only Sparabara, even with spearmen alone, you're going to be able to rain hell on the Persian as a Celt player. And meanwhile, for the Persian response, it's been pretty ideal really, going up to 2 ranges and adding stables as well. So adding the stables as well as continuing to produce units out of the barracks really forces a Celt player to have to produce both spearmen and long swordsmen from their barracks, and because there's bowmen, there needs to be a slinger response. So this is sort of good play from both players compositionally now, I think, and Vahuva doing a really good job at taking a good amount of bowmen before adding the Asabara, and he's only going to add a small amount. He's only getting the 1 stables, which is ideal, because if you add a lot of stables against Celt, all they've got to do is add more and more spearmen, perhaps get a couple of druids positioned elsewhere to heal them, and get a Bard Hall so he can get the movement speed upgrades on the spearmen, try and equalize the difference in the speed, and yeah, he should be able to defend with a much more cost-effective, population-effective sort of composition. So only a small number of Asabara is a good thing for Vahuva, because then it means he can really convince his opponent to try not to produce too many spears, to leave all his outer resources undefended, and then to come in with 3 or 4 or 5 Asabara in 1 or 2 spots and really hinder his opponent. So be interesting to see whether Vahuva tries to go for a big bust or whether he starts doing a bit of raiding first, but I think he's probably going to do a bit of a bust attempt here, because he's got these 2 storehouses here healing up the army, actually doing a bit of gathering on his opponent's doorstep, so this tends to really put them under a bit of pressure to try and clean this up before anything else. There's a great number of bowmen, so it means that even when they're taking hits from the slingers, if there's not a follow-up attack, a second one to actually kill them, then yeah, they can continue to return fire and get healed. And the 810's actually healing up the forward units here. Perhaps this one could have been put there, but otherwise, ultimately a good trade there for Vahuva. Crimson actually coming off worse for wear, despite really being the defender in that instance, because his base is only right here. So Crimson having to opt for more ranges at this point, going up to 4 now. 4 racks, 4 range from this Kelp player, and a grove to continue adding his druids. And Vahuva actually doing a good aid tent creep here, so this is going to really lock down this pass, similarly to a wall. And over on this side, Vahuva actually getting the quicker wall off here, so Crimson's not going to be able to have control over this gateway unless he puts his own wall just here, and then puts another one here perhaps, and destroys it. So yeah, all being walled off by Crimson. I mean by Vahuva, and Crimson unable to really do much with that until he adds the gate and gets out. So that villager was just dancing around. I think that Crimson just hadn't realised. So actually 5 ranges now from the Kelp player. He's taken the movement speed upgrade. He's going to take brewing eventually, as soon as he can get the food to be able to sustain getting that and being able to produce more units. Village counts 58 to 56. So now Crimson actually a little bit ahead in terms of the villager production. He's actually notoriously really strong at continuing his economic production, and not long after this he should look at adding markets. I'm not saying that he should do it, but I mean in terms of as a Crimson thing, he nearly always would do it a little bit sooner, a little bit earlier than this perhaps even. Although that unmicroed villager is going to hurt him a little bit. Okay, so he's got a good number of slingers to deal with the high amount of bowmen here from Vahuva now, so. But the long swordsmen are perhaps a little bit dangerously positioned. The slingers need to come back. Everything needs to sort of bunch up down in here, and Crimson knows that. He's bringing everything back. He's got his druids in the mix, but he's only got 1 left at this point because Vahuva's actually managed to snipe them, so one of the barracks is falling. Vahuva staying at about 150 population at this point. Crimson dropping down to about 110. Things aren't looking so crash hot for Crimson because these slingers do an awful lot less damage to a front line than the bowmen do, so without some of the slingers chipping away at that, this is going to be really hairy for the Kelp player. He's going to fall ever further behind on units, so Crimson down to about 90 population to 145 to Vahuva, so it's about a 5 to 20 loss there in the time that I've been talking. And right now Vahuva sort of weirdly wedged between his opponent's town centres, and Crimson needs to try and focus fire onto these. GG! Oh. Alright, so in terms of the scores, Crimson actually doing a really good job at keeping up in terms of the macro, and Vahuva doing a good job at really sort of setting the pace with that once he started taking his forward aid tents. But yeah, I sort of expected that one to go a little bit longer really. But GG, well played to both players. And in terms of the oops, let's go to current population. Crimson actually taking a couple of really nice fights in Age 1 and early Age 2 with his high spearman count, but I think, like I said, he probably would have been better off with getting a range straight after his second barracks rather than after his third, and potentially adding a couple more long swordsmen a little bit earlier. Not worrying so much about having to get the spearman. Perhaps he was a little bit limited on gold, because playing like that where you're getting both long swordsmen and the slingers out seems to really be the gating factor for the Celt in Age 2, is the gold, whereas the bowmen and the sparrers don't cost a great deal of gold, and the Asabara, you can sort of afford to basically dump most of your gold into them. So anyway, GG well played to both players. I'm gonna see if I can get some players to play another game, but if not, yeah, if I can't get anyone else, I think I might call it. Yeah, so yeah guys, I might leave it at that. I'll see you later. Thanks for watching, hey?